Hello there, my friends, and welcome to this episode of The Atheist Experiment. Have you ever heard somebody say this? Why is space exploration useful? We have so many problems down here on Earth. Why do we need to waste money going into space? It's so expensive, and for what? We don't even know everything about our own oceans yet. Why don't we figure that out first before we waste our money going into space? This is what I often hear from people whenever the subject of space exploration comes up. On the surface and at first glance, these sound like reasonable arguments, but it always gets my blood boiling. So I want to try to put my resentment aside and articulate to you something relatively coherent. So I think that at the core of human existence is that we are explorers. I mean, look around us. I challenge you to find any day-to-day item or activity that isn't a result of someone who thought about something different. A new way to do something, a new device or tool to improve a task. Someone had to think about the first chair, or the first pair of shoes, or a new mode of transportation. All the things we take for granted are a result of someone thinking outside the box, inventing something by exploring new possibilities, and taking a leap into an area that no one had been before. It's how we discover anything, whether it be at the bottom of the ocean, at the top of a mountain, the North Pole, the South Pole, and everything in between. Everything in our lives is a result of people who explored the unknown. We'd still be in caves if we didn't check out what was on the other side of the mountain. This exploration reveals to us not only answers to questions, but maybe questions that we never even thought to ask. When we explore space and all the universe has to offer, we are likely to discover something that makes us ask a question we wouldn't even thought about. And in asking those unexpected new questions, new discoveries are just around the corner. It is impossible to predict, but going to Mars may reveal the cure for cancer. And that's not as far-fetched as it may sound. It is estimated that about 8% of the world's tech that we take for granted was derived from the advancements of NASA exploration. We are right now learning and inventing ways to deflect ELEs, extinction level event asteroids, which may be the first time a species was able to prevent such a disaster from taking place. I mean, there's no evidence that the dinosaurs had a space program, which is why they couldn't prevent their own extinction. We can do that. We have more and more accurate weather and climate predictability than ever before. GPS and high-speed communication has enabled us to shrink the world we live in so we can exchange ideas in a moment, rather than sending a letter by a boat 12 weeks across the ocean. The technology of the imaging systems in an MRI machine came from the development of imaging the moon. The employment of MRIs have saved many, many lives with its accurate tomography of the human body. Heart pump transplants are derived from the space shuttle's fuel pumps. Ear thermometers, laser angioplasty, tools for cataract surgery, fiber optics, memory foam, cordless power tools, smoke detectors, the list goes on and on. An interesting fact though, Velcro and Tang, commonly recognized as inventions by NASA, were not actually created by NASA at all. But it was NASA that made these things popular. Now, as for the cost, well, let's really look at it and see what it actually costs. NASA funding during its heyday around moon exploration and shuttle programs was about 1% of the US national budget. Now, keep in mind, at the same time, the budget for the military was over 10%, and still is today. That means that 1% of your tax money went to funding NASA. So if you made $500 a week, you gave less than $1 a day to NASA. Currently, the NASA budget is around 4% of 1%, which means it's costing Americans about 4 cents a day to keep the lights on at NASA. And they're still able to make significant advancements in space exploration. Now, all other sciences get about 2 to 3% of the overall budget. So that's still about 8 times more than NASA gets. All other sciences get a lot of private funding as well, which eclipses the government share. So yeah, NASA doesn't get much. When you do a Google search for where do my tax dollars go in the United States, NASA doesn't even show up on the list because it's so insignificant. This percentage translates into about $24 billion. Sounds like a lot. But to put that into perspective, last year Americans spent $960 billion on Christmas. So if you really want to talk about wasting money, why don't we talk about that? So yes, when the national budget is in the hundreds of trillions of dollars, a couple $1 billion is really not very much. So let's stop talking about how expensive space exploration is, because it's not really, and we probably should be spending more. Now, space exploration also has had a profound effect on almost every person who has seen Earth from space, and there's a name for it. It's called the overview effect, and it has had an influence on our culture, and I would argue a positive one. What happens is that the astronaut sees the Earth for the very first time from a completely different perspective. When they look down on the continents, the first thing that they notice is that there are no borders, no separation of cultures, and no sense of division. And they begin to wonder, why do we fight each other every day over territory? Why is there hate between nations and races? All they see when they look down are land masses, oceans, and clouds. And all this fighting begins to seem quite petty. Every person who ever existed, everyone you ever knew or heard of lived out their life on this tiny little dot in the vastness of the universe. Every religion, every war, every new discovery happened right there on the surface of this ball, hurtling through space at 110,000 kilometers per hour. We shouldn't be screaming in hatred, but we should be screaming in horror at the way we treat each other. This overview effect is one of the reasons we need to keep doing space exploration. In the 1960s, the people of the world saw, for the very first time, what the Earth looked like from above. And it was shortly after this that the EPA was formed, the Environmental Protection Agency. The Civil Rights Act was passed, as was the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act, all of which has had a positive impact on our society. University enrollment doubled in the 60s and laid the groundwork for the digital age, which arguably has had a monumental effect on the Earth culture as a whole. But as the overview effect continues to overwhelm astronauts, it has faded in the minds of the world. Pictures of the Earth are everywhere and commonplace. It just doesn't seem spectacular anymore. We have gotten so used to seeing it that maybe it's lost its meaning. Kind of like the caveman who first ventured out over the other side of that mountain and discovered a whole new world of lush, abundant forest. At first, it was amazement at the beauty of this new place, but after a while, it becomes less dramatic, less interesting. So after a while, that same caveman, he ventures out across the next mountain to see what dramatic vistas he might encounter, what fruits he might taste, and along with that, new dangers and fears of the unknown. But he must go because it's worth it. Something within him drives him, and he just needs to go and see what might be on Mars. Maybe the cure for cancer is waiting for him in his next adventure. Take care, my friends, and I hope to see you next time on The Atheist Experiment. Hey there, my friends. If you enjoy my videos and you would like to see more, click subscribe, and don't forget to click on the little bell to get your notifications. You can also follow me on Facebook and Instagram. Just look for The Atheist Experiment and you'll find me. See you next time, and stay skeptical.